This is Italy during World War II, a nation under the leadership of Benito Mussolini. His performance was a farce, making him a real liability to the Axis allies, yet the general public and academic circles often implicitly considered Italy a failure, knowing that behind this lies a complex story of politics, logistics, and internal conspiracies that broke the claws of his successor. Let in 39's return to Italy. In 19 Your Eyes, it was Benito Mussolini, one of the men who plunged the world into the greatest war of all time. He was born on 29 in Pritio, Flicicina, into a family of blacksmiths, because there were few job opportunities in that region in 1902. Mussolini emigrated to Switzerland and began participating in socialist political activities. In 1904, he returned to Italy and worked as a reporter for a socialist newspaper. However, Mussolini abandoned this idea when he supported Italy in 39's entry into World War I and joined the army in. After the war ended, he founded the Fascist Party, attracting support from many unemployed war veterans. They organized themselves into armed groups called the Sidensquat, with the aim of terrorizing Mussolini and 39's political opponents. In 1921, the Fascist Party was invited to join the coalition government. By October 1922, when Italy was in a state of political chaos, Mussolini seized the opportunity and emerged as the only one capable of restoring order. He gradually eliminated the institutions of democratic government and by 1925 declared himself dictator with the title of leader. After seizing supreme power, Mussolini immediately set about realizing his dream of rebuilding Italy into a European power. This ambition began with the invasion of Siberia's present-day Ethiopia and the annexation of officially attacking this African nation. The head of the Italian High Command, Pietro, visited assembly points in the Ethiopian peninsula and returned with a grim report that a war at this time would only cause financial burdens. The general made this clear at a meeting of the High Command in September 1934, but his warnings were completely ignored by others. Ultimately, the invasion plan was approved, and it took the Italian army 2 years to achieve victory. Furthermore, while the fighting in Ethiopia was still intense, Mussolini also sent troops into the Spanish Civil War. This conflict was the flashpoint of ideological contradictions between the reformist left wing and the conservative right wing. Between centuries-old ancient orders, the demands of modern change. This not only caused deep divisions in Spain, but also spread throughout the entire European continent during that period. Hitler and Mussolini found an unparalleled opportunity to test their armies, which harbored ambitions of redistributing the world. At the height of the Civil War, approximately 70,000 Italian soldiers and 12,000 German soldiers fought under the banner of General Francisco Franco, one of the key leaders of the right wing. Mussolini and 39's assistants played a decisive role in Franco and 39's dictatorial regime gaining control of Spain. Apart from Spain, Italy deployed more troops than any other country, with an estimated 4,000 casualties. Not only did Mussolini provide manpower, but he also showed extreme generosity towards his allies, supplying Franco with over 600 aircraft and 800 cannons, 10,000 machine guns, and hundreds of thousands of riflemen. And that wasn't in 39 tall, just 5 months before the Second Reich 39's arrival on October 0, 1939. Albania again. In just 5 days, the small Albanian forces were overwhelmed and the country was forced into exile. All those wars, although considered valuable training exercises for the army by Mussolini, actually contained a hidden danger. The French had depleted too many resources, and therefore they could not be ready for a large-scale all-out war. This danger gradually became a reality when they agreed to a military alliance with Nazi Germany through the Iron Pact, under which the two countries implemented collective defense and engaged in combat. If the ally was attacked by the French, they would coordinate to begin a war that would cast a shadow over global fascism. Neither side was allowed to fire a shot before 1943 because of the officials. Italy had calculated that it needed until 1942 to prepare for all-out war. However, in 1939, Hitler broke the agreement when the Polish military officially launched the Second World War. Without prior agreement with Mussolini, this was not good news for Italy because they were not yet prepared for this war. Firstly, their army had not upgraded its weapons since World War I. The Air Force still used biplanes. The Navy had no aircraft carriers. The tanks were very old, and there was almost no radio communication system. Their infantry still used horse-drawn artillery and outdated rifles. In fact, many Italian officials had noticed this problem, but they could do nothing as their manufacturing industry was in an extremely bad state at the time. This was a consequence of the 1929-1933. In addition, unlike Germany, they had the long-standing preparations for self-sufficiency during World War II meant that Italy, already weak, had to succumb to a sharp decline in industrial production due to its dependence on imported raw materials. When Mussolini decided to cooperate with Hitler, Britain implemented a naval blockade to cut off the country in 39's coal supply. Access was also hampered as its previous suppliers, the United States, Iran, stopped exporting as war approached, forcing Italy to rely on Romania supplement its meager domestic oil production. The result of all this was a weakened Italian army, lacking reliable fuel supplies, an overloaded industry. Italy was easily paralyzed. Factories and enterprises were forced to close or scale down operations. Production in key industries such as iron and steel, machinery, and consumer goods all declined sharply. This not only weakened Italy in 39's strength, but also indirectly affected other countries. Initially, when they were unable to produce enough tanks or create weapons comparable to those of other nations in the Axis, Mussolini saw all these realities and ordered his army to remain inactive. During the early stages of the war in 1940, letter advising Hitler against attacking Britain, in which the Nazi leader expressed his doubts about the necessity of risking everything, including the regime, and sacrificing the elite individuals of the German generation. However, this could not shake Hitler and Viet Nam's iron will, and Mussolini could only observe the progress of the Nazi war with anxiety and envy. He worried that if he did not participate, he would lose the opportunity to seize the European territories that Nazi Germany was conquering. Finally, realizing that France would soon be subdued by Hitler and Viet Nam's army, Mussolini decided that he could not delay any longer. Just 3 days before the attack, the German advance into Paris on 1940 officially declared war on Britain and France. However, in the very first month of the war, the Italian army suffered a major loss when it lost its most capable leader, Ida Balbo. He was one of the 4 leaders of the March on Rome armed protest in 1922, helping Benito Mussolini to come to power. Besides that, Balbo played a crucial role in transforming the Royal Italian Air Force into one of the strongest forces in the world before the Great Depression. Despite these achievements, this man remained a thorn in the side of country and Viet Nam's leaders, supported by his fondness for Britain and his anti-parted views, opposed the formation of an alliance with Nazi Germany, believing that it would eventually turn against Italy. He argued that fascism should be used to improve the living standards of the people and to strengthen the country and Viet Nam's power. It was a nationalistic sentiment, not a tool to punish other countries. These very points led Mussolini to eliminate Balbo by sending him to Libya, a poor colony with 90 square kilometers covered in. Then, on June 28, 1940, the plane carrying him to the T region of Libya was shot down by the Italian army, mistakenly believing it to be a British bomber. To this day, there are theories that this was not a mistake but an assassination mission carried out on Mussolini and T-39's orders. This leads us to another reason for the Italian failure. There was a deep rift within the leadership at the time. Furthermore, Bambo and 39's departure highlighted an even more serious problem. Apart from him, the remaining generals in the Italian army were extremely weak in their leadership abilities, as evidenced by the series of defeats. Their first battle was the Siege of Malta, a confrontation between the German-Italian coalition and the British Army for control of the Mediterranean front. This was an extremely important battle, as the island was the last strategic base of the Allies in the Mediterranean, a vital artery, not only for transporting troops and launching counterattacks against the enemy, but also the coordination center of the Royal Navy and 39's Mediterranean Fleet, which commanded all Allied naval operations in the region. It could be said that once Malta was captured, the entire North African region would fall into the hands of the Axis powers. Therefore, the fascist army was determined to attack and had offended the British forces there, forcing them to retreat. This was done quite well in the early stages of the campaign, but later the Allied forces were unable to withstand the increasingly ineffective attacks of the Italian army. The reason was the excessive caution of the generals under Mussolini. This originated from the Battle of Taranto on November 11, 1940, when the British realized that the Royal Italian Navy was too timid to lose its valuable warships, so they launched a surprise attack that destroyed 3. Then, in March 1940, further attack by the Royal Italian Navy on Cape Matapan also severely damaged the Royal Italian Navy and F-39's only remaining operational battleship, sinking 3 cruisers and 2 frigates. These 2 events demoralized the Italian commanders, preventing them from landing troops on Matapan. Instead, they could only rely on air power, bombard the area. This, coupled with a severe shortage of supplies, prevented the Royal Italian Navy from fully utilizing its potential to control the Mediterranean and secure a victory for the Axis North. While the Greek invasion was underway, Mussolini and 39's intended military campaign, a seemingly easy one, turned into a disaster stemming from weaknesses in preparation, most clearly demonstrated in the training of the Italian infantry. While Italy boasted one of the world and 39's largest armies at 200,000 men, in reality the majority were infantry, without the support of modern combat equipment. This was due to Italy and 39's continued application of World War I tactics, failing to keep pace with the changes in warfare. Furthermore, their training schools lacked updated curricula to help soldiers adapt to the development of tanks and other advanced vehicles. In addition, instead of thorough training before battle, Italian soldiers often had to learn combat skills directly on the battlefield under high-pressure conditions and with little time to familiarize themselves with combat techniques. Adding to this was the lack of effective leadership. Under Mussolini, they greatly underestimated the resistance of the Greek army, leading them to draw up a. On October 28, the Italians issued a letter demanding that Greece relinquish territory. When flatly refused, Mussolini immediately ordered his army to attack, using the newly annexed Albania as a base. 2 Italian divisions marched through the Pus Mountains, hoping to advance quickly south and occupy Athens within 2 weeks. However, the logistics and movement of the Italian army were immediately hampered by the harsh climate. Thus, within only 11 days of the start of the invasion, the Italian attacks were completely halted by the strong resistance of the Greek army. They were even forced to retreat back to the Albanian border, facing imminent defeat. Frantically ordered his generals to bring in troops from other areas to reinforce the front in Greece, despite warnings from Badu, then chief of staff of the Italian army, that this would pave the way for the British to gain control of the entire North. Mussolini ignored them, partly out of fear that his power would fall into the hands of someone who had just rightfully given him authority. Ultimately, the most insightful leader in the Italian army at the time was forced to become a scapegoat for successive defeats and was replaced by Hugo Cavallero. This created an undercurrent within the Italian army, as other senior officers feared they would also suffer similar injustice in the future. Mussolini and 39's misguided decisions led to his own downfall. From October 1942 May 1941, the number of soldiers sent to fight in Greece and Albania was 5 times greater than the forces deployed against the British in North Africa, and the equipment sent there was also 1.3 times greater. This means the Italian Navy was forced to prioritize transporting troops, food, and weapons to Albania and the Aegean Sea rather than securing supply lines to North Africa. Despite these setbacks, the Battle of City remained in dire straits because the rugged terrain and weather of Albania hampered radio communication, preventing the force from effectively coordinating its troops. Realizing that the Italian army could not end the invasion on its own, the Cosa forces were forced to split their forces and advance into Greece in April 1941. The Italian command was finally able to shift its attention back to North Africa. This further diminished Mussolini and Viet 39's prestige among the Italian people, and more importantly, cost him not only the opportunity to surpass Hitler, but also left him indebted to the man he envied most. However, things didn't in 39 to end there, as the North African front continued to be an example of the weak leadership of the Italian military, including the heavy defeat against the Allies in Operation C. In this battle, the Italian army, with its massive force of 100,000 to 50,000 men, defeated before even facing a British army of 31,000 soldiers. The commander of the Italian army in this disastrous defeat was Rodolfo Razzani, once considered one of Italy and 39's best generals, despite his extensive experience gained from numerous wars of colonial conquest. However, his tactics were later deemed outdated and unsuitable for fighting the British at that time by many historians. Although the Italian army had a significant advantage in manpower, it quickly succumbed to the 39's powerful and paper flag forces. Tank units like the 2nd Marcia, equipped with thick armor and powerful firepower, launched a surprise attack on the Italian defenses, breaking through their fortifications and strong defensive lines, allowing infantry and other forces to advance and eliminate the enemy. In the ensuing battle, the Italian forces captured approximately 1,000 Axis prisoners, directly leading to the defeat of the Italian army. The complete collapse of the command system caused Mussolini to lose all control of North Africa. Italy 39's fate was temporarily saved by Hitler when he sent the Desert Fox Erwin Romm to carry out Operation Sonderblum to win the Italian army. The German intervention and their victories in North Africa further highlighted Italy and 39's weaknesses in both leadership and logistics. The successive defeats caused the confidence of the people and Mussolini and 39's government to hit rock bottom at home more and more. People opposed the war, while on the battlefield, the morale of the soldiers was clearly demoralized. This laid the groundwork for Italy, and 39 surrendered it before the war ended. Unlike some other countries participating in World War II, the people of Italy had decided early on not wanting their capital Rome to be destroyed by the enemy. For them, their homeland was paramount. Blind loyalty to a fascist government. The final blow came when the Allied forces, in July 1943. On July 25th, by order of the King of Italy, Mussolini was arrested and Field Marshal Pietro Badoglio was appointed Prime Minister to replace him. This event also marked the end of the existence of fascism in Italy. New government immediately negotiated with the Allies for an armistice agreement and officially declared an amnesty. Overall, the failure of the Italian Empire in World War I is clear evidence that a military force cannot fight effectively without thorough preparation and decisive leadership. Weaknesses in strategy and logistics, a lack of coordination and inexperience in soldier training made the Italian army a burden on the Axis battlefield. Furthermore, behind this were internal rifts within the fascists, power struggles, and a lack of trust among high-ranking leaders. Furthermore, excessive dependence on Nazi Germany and a lack of independent preparation exacerbated the situation. All these factors contributed to the fact that the country will always be remembered as a liability to the Axis powers in World War II, leaving a dark stain on the military history of this nation.